From my experience, hydrogen sulfide control and management is a key part of the successful operation of an anaerobic digester facility. Managing hydrogen sulfide, whether it's in your gas or in the digester liquid itself, is critical to the safe operation of your feedstock system, but also to your biological health and managing good degradation to avoid foam production in your digester, but to also avoid overloading your RNG upgrader or gas cleaning systems. So when we're talking about H2S, let's just review the terminology, making sure we're using the same words to mean the same thing. So H2S, or hydrogen sulfide, most people, when they're saying that, they refer to the hydrogen sulfide gas. And so this is the hydrogen sulfide gas that you would measure in the biogas itself. So that's here. This is gas in the headspace and in the biogas. So in terms of, the important parts, the revenue piece, the hydrogen sulfide in the gas goes off with the biogas, and this goes to your RNG upgrader or your CHP engine. So that's where that is important. But if you have hydrogen sulfide in the gas, that's a big deal because that can also create some very dangerous situations. Hydrogen sulfide gas is a very deadly poison. It has a rotten egg smell to it at low concentrations, but at high concentration, it can actually instantly kill your sense of smell, so you can't detect it at high concentrations. That's one of the things that makes it so dangerous and really worthy of a lot of respect. So hydrogen sulfide gas is a deadly poison and a real issue for safety of your operators. Now, of the different forms, though, we have hydrogen sulfide gas in the headspace. And that comes from hydrogen sulfide gas that's dissolved in the water. So soluble gas in water, gas in the water in the digestate. And we also have the ion forms, so the HS and the S double minus ions. So for all you chemists on the internet, this is not a balanced equation, and that's okay. We'll be just fine with this for today. So the hydrogen sulfide in dissolved ion form. So these are important later on because these affect your biology. In the water phase is these dissolved ions. These dissolved ions react. They react with metals and other minerals in the digester itself. So the reason why adding a iron, for instance, like the ferric chloride, works is because the iron reacts with the sulfur and it chemically binds together. Now, if that iron is not there, the sulfur will tend to bind with other nutritional metals like nickel, cobalt, molybdenum, things that are essential trace nutrients for the digester to operate well. It's pretty common to have a high sulfur event that you notice as a high H2S event, maybe 1500, 2000 ppm H2S. And then 1 or 2 or 3 weeks later, your digester has a biological upset and it's not obvious why. What we've seen over the years is that's often related to a nutrient problem, which resulted from a high sulfur bloom. And that nutrient control is a little bit in depth for this video. We'll get back to that in a different video. Okay. Now the hydrogen sulfide in the gas and biology phase in dissolved ions. So moving back and forth though is through a chemical equilibrium. And the important piece to remember is the pH and the temperature. The pH and temperature are the things that control how much of the hydrogen sulfide is in the gas form and how much of the hydrogen sulfide is in the dissolved ion form. So here we have the hydrogen sulfide rainbow chart. Talking to anybody at Azura about the hydrogen sulfide rainbow chart, and we're going to know this is what you're talking about. Now, in this case, I said pH and temperature affects the form of hydrogen sulfide, whether it's dissolved ion or in the gas. So in this case, this chart is showing or how much of the total sulfides are in the hydrogen sulfide or the H2S gas form. Okay. And now let's take an example here. So if we're running at, say, 37.8 or 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and the pH of our digester, say we're at around 15%. So around 15% of our H2S is in this H2S gas form. If we have a problem with our digester heating and we lose some temperature, we lose some heat from the digester. If we have a change in our feeding and we drop the pH, so say we drop down to 90 degrees Fahrenheit and the pH is 7. Well, through this change here we're at 45%. So in this change though, okay, we've went from 15 to 45%. What's the big deal? So the big deal is that the amount of H2S in the gas form has actually gone up by 3x. And that's a pretty significant change. If the amount of sulfur in the sulfide gas form that's going to your RNG upgrader goes up by 3x, you need to make sure your RNG upgrader is going to be able to handle that. However, that's only part of the story. Remember, I was talking about safety. Well, here in your digester plant, we have our happy digester dome. We have a feedstock tank, which is partly below ground. So here, for example, we have something in the bottom of the tank. We've been getting some different feedstocks in that are somewhat alkaline. They're at a high pH. They're maybe 20 degrees Celsius ambient temperature. No big deal. But when we look at it and say, well, hang on a second, if we're at a pH of say 8 and I'll call it 70 degrees Fahrenheit, that's how far this chart goes. If we're at pH 8 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 10% of the sulfide is in this hydrogen sulfide gas form. Now, what happens though, and this is a real situation that can actually happen, and it can happen at your plant and be quite dangerous. If you have a truck of feedstock coming and you have some acid whey from a local yogurt manufacturer, for instance, so that material is at a pH of 4.5. Well, holy smokes, what happens here? Well, in your sulfur, if 10% of it is in the H2S form, and we're already off the chart here, we get all the way over to a pH of 4.5. Guess what? 99.8% of your H2S is in this H2S gas form. So this goes from 10% to almost 100%. So your H2S gas here, this can go up by 10x. And this can happen in the span of 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It can happen very quickly. And in doing so, we create this cloud of potentially H2S gas here in the headspace in the tank. It can overwhelm your odor control system, or if this gas is coming out into the room, well, it can absolutely create a dangerous situation for your operators. All right, so let us not do that, okay? So looking back at the digester side, so where does this H2S come from? Where did these sulfur compounds come from in the first place? Well, a lot of the sulfur originates in high protein feedstock. So these would be things like slaughterhouse materials, meat processing. It can also include some, say, high sulfur loads like leachate, landfill leachate, or leachate from compost systems can have high sulfur in it as well. One of the other places we at Azura, we do a fair bit of work in the food industry. And we know, for example, that a number of dissolved air flotation systems in the food processing world use sulfuric acid. So uses sulfuric acid, which has this formula. They use sulfuric acid to control the pH in the dissolved air flotation system. So that does a couple things for us. One is that dissolved air flotation material often is high in fat. It has great energy in it, but it's also fairly acidic. So not just acidic whey can be at a pH of 4.5, but your DAF float from a slaughterhouse can be at a pH of 4.5 because if they're doing that acid treatment in their DAF system. The other thing that can happen is that, look here, it's full of sulfates, and in your digester, those sulfates will degrade and release a whole lot of sulfur. So you can be bringing in quite a bit of sulfur in your dissolved air flotation material that you're thinking is maybe it's just a high fat feedstock and great energy, but it also brings in quite a bit of H2S in the form of sulfur, which breaks down to your digester, becomes dissolved ions, then the dissolved ions becomes soluble gas, and a bunch of that soluble H2S gas ends up in your headspace and ends up in your CHP or your RNG upgrading system. So what do we do about that? Well, there's a few things we can do. First off is prevention. Prevention is almost always the cheapest way. So understanding the sulfur potential in your feedstock. The second thing you can do is if you have sulfur in your feedstock, make sure you're pricing that appropriately so you can recover that cost of treatment from your customer. So additives, high iron additives, for example, ferric chloride liquid, iron oxide, iron hydroxide powders. Those are the most common additives widely available. There's quite a few manufacturers of those types of materials. Some work better than others, some work faster, some work slower. There's a lot of different reasons in those purchasing decisions. The other thing some folks do is they add what's called micro aeration. So that's adding a small amount of air or purified oxygen into their digester systems to biologically treat some of that sulfur inside the digester tank. Other folks will treat that high sulfur in the gas stream, either on the way to the CHP or on the way to the RNG system as well. Now, not everybody needs to treat that H2S. Some folks are happy to have that H2S at a moderate concentration in the biogas. Folks who are taking their biogas and putting it into blending their biogas and sending it into a boiler at their factory, they maybe don't need any sulfur removal technology. They don't need to pay for any costly interventions. Those are all different ways to manage the sulfur. Thank you.